My cousin Ruth had always been the golden child of the family business, but behind the polished smiles and fake promises, she was hiding a dangerous addiction. When her brother finally exposed her, years of jealousy and lies exploded in front of everyone. What followed wasn't just a fight about money, it was the total collapse of trust, family bonds, and our future. I never thought I'd be writing about this online, but honestly, my family feels like it's straight out of a Netflix drama right now. For context, my cousin Ruth 40F has been deeply involved in our family business since we were teenagers. My uncle, her dad, Peter, started the business back in the late 80s, an auto parts store in our small town that eventually grew into 3 full locations. It's not glamorous, but it's always been steady, and for years, Ruth was the face of it. Everyone always said Ruth was the smart one, the one who would take the business to the next level. Meanwhile, her younger brother Mark 38M was seen as a screw-up. He dropped out of college, worked odd jobs, and only came back to the business when he had nowhere else to go. I used to feel bad for him because every family gathering ended the same way, someone bragging about Ruth's brilliant business sense and someone else side-eyeing Mark for not measuring up. But here's what nobody wanted to admit: Ruth wasn't as perfect as she seemed. She had this addictive streak. First it was drinking, then gambling, and more recently, I found out it was pills. At first, I thought it was just stress. She'd take headache medicine constantly, disappear into the office for an hour, then come back wired and ready to argue with anyone who questioned her decisions. One night, about 6 months ago, Mark pulled me aside after a family dinner at my aunt's house. We were standing outside by the garage, and he just blurted out, "Do you know Ruth's been using company money for her habit?" I froze. "What do you mean habit?" He gave me this look like I was being dense. "She soaked on pills, painkillers. I've seen the receipts, thousands missing. Uncle Peter's blind to it. But I swear she's going to sink the whole business if nobody says anything." I didn't know what to say. I'd seen Ruth tired, snappy, sometimes even erratic, but I guess I never wanted to put the pieces together. Mark, though, looked desperate. For once, he wasn't the jealous little brother. He looked like someone carrying a truth too heavy to hold. Things came to a head 2 weeks later. We were at the main office, this old brick building downtown with the peeling green awning. My uncle had called a meeting about expansion plans. Ruth was at the head of the table, flipping through her colour-coded charts, talking about opening a 4th location. Mark interrupted her mid-sentence. "Before we start talking about new stores, maybe we should talk about the money that's already missing." The room went dead silent. My uncle's face turned beet red. Ruth slammed her folder shut so hard paper scattered across the table. "What the hell are you talking about, Mark?" she hissed. And just like that, decades of sibling rivalry spilled out in front of everyone. The second Mark said those words, it felt like all the oxygen in the room got sucked out. My aunt Linda, their mom, was sitting in the corner, clutching her handbag like it was a lifeline. She whispered, "Mark, don't start," but it was too late. "I'm not starting," he shot back. "Ruth's been stealing from the business. I've got proof." Ruth jumped to her feet. "Proof? You mean your paranoid little conspiracy theories? You've always hated that Dad trusted me more." "Trusted?" Mark laughed bitterly. "You've been draining the cunts to feed your pill problem while the rest of us are busting our asses." I swear, you could have heard a pin drop. Even the old ceiling fan above us seemed to pulse. My Uncle Peter's jaw tightened. He looked at me, like maybe I'd confirm or deny what Mark was saying. But my mouth went dry. "Mark," Uncle Peter said, in that slow, dangerous tone dads get when they're about to lose it. "Don't you dare accuse your sister of that." "She's not my boss, Dad," Mark snapped. "And she sure as hell isn't the saviour of this business. You're blind. She's been lying to you for years." Ruth's face went red, but instead of exploding, she turned cold. She gathered her papers, smoothed them out, and said, "This is pathetic. You can't stand that. I built something you'll never understand. You want to drag me down because you've never been anything but a screw-up." Mark slammed his hand on the table. "You think I don't notice the missing invoices, the fake suppliers? You're not as sick as you think." At that point, my Aunt Linda burst into tears. "Please, stop, both of you. This is a family business, not a circus." Well, honestly, it was already a circus. Employees from the front office were peeking in the doorway. Everyone could hear every word. I finally found my voice and tried to calm things down. "Ruth, just tell him he's wrong. Show the numbers. If you didn't take anything, then prove it." Ruth shot me a glare like I'd just stabbed her. "So now you're on his side too?" I held up my hands. "I'm not on anyone's side, but if there's an accusation like this, it has to be cleared up. Otherwise it'll poison everything." Mark jumped on that. "Exactly, Dad. If you won't look at the books yourself, I'll bring in an accountant, independent. Let's see what they find." That set Ruth off. She lunged across the table, jabbing her finger at Mark's chest. "You bring in some outsider, and you'll regret it. Don't you dare touch what I built." Uncle Peter finally slammed his fist so hard the table rattled. "Enough, not another word." The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Ruth stormed out, heels clacking against the tile. Mark followed a few minutes later, muttering about how he was done protecting secrets. I just sat there, staring at the mess of papers on the table. For the first time in my life, I realized the family business wasn't just at risk, it was crumbling right in front of me. The next few days were absolute hell. The office felt like a war zone, even though no one was physically fighting. Employees whispered in corners, phone calls were avoided, and every email from Ruth carried a passive-aggressive dagger. Mark, on the other hand, acted like a man possessed. He was combing through spreadsheets, bank statements, and invoices like a detective on a crime show. I tried to stay neutral, but seeing Ruth's fists every time I came into the office made my stomach twist. She avoided me at first, but then she cornered me in the back storage room. "Why are you siding with him?" she hissed, eyes wild, pupils dilated. Her hand was shaking slightly as she gripped a box of inventory files. "I'm not siding with anyone, Ruth. I don't want this to destroy everything Uncle Peter built." I could feel my own voice trembling. She laughed bitterly, a sound that made my heart ache. "Destroy. This business isn't yours to save. It's mine. Always has been. Everyone's always worshipped me while Mark's been nothing but a thorn in my side." "Ruth." I tried, but she snapped her hand toward the door, signaling me to leave. Later that week, Mark finally brought in the accountant. I wasn't sure what I expected, and maybe a small discrepancy, maybe just tension, but the truth was way worse than I imagined. Tens of thousands of dollars had gone missing. Receipts for fake suppliers, cash withdrawals labelled as miscellaneous, unexplained expenses, everything pointed to Ruth. When we confronted her, the change in her was terrifying. Her carefully maintained veneer cracked. "You think this proves anything?" she said, voice low, almost whispering. "You think you can take me down? I've been the backbone of this business since I was 22. You wouldn't even be here without me." Mark's jaw tightened. "It's not about who built what, it's about theft and addiction. You putting everyone at risk, Ruth, including yourself." She laughed, this hollow, jagged laugh that made my skin crawl. "Addiction, yeah, fine, I've got my demons, but I'm better than all of you who sit there pretending you're perfect." My uncle, Peter, finally stepped in. "Enough, Ruth. We're giving you a chance to fix this, rehab, restitution, and therapy, or you leave. I won't let my family destroy itself because of pride and pills." For the first time, I saw fear flash in her eyes. Not the confident Ruth who always had an answer, but the broken, panicked woman hiding behind the corporate facade. She left the office that day, slamming the door behind her. The silence afterward was deafening. Mark looked exhausted, shoulders slumped. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that the truth was out. Sorrow that our cousin, the family we all loved, was fighting demons she couldn't handle alone. That night, I stayed late in the office, looking at the empty chair where Ruth usually sat. I realized sibling rivalry had turned into something far uglier: addiction, secrets, and betrayal. And while the business might survive, the family might not. Ruth disappeared for a week after that confrontation. No calls, no messages, just gone. Mark insisted she was hiding out, probably spiraling deeper into her addiction. I tried calling her, texting her, even showing up at her apartment, but it was like she'd vanished from the face of the earth. Then, on the 7th day, my phone rang. It was Aunt Linda, her voice trembling. "Lessa, you need to come to the hospital. It's Ruth." I dropped everything and raced over. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear. Mark was already there, pacing the hallway. When the doctor came out, he said she'd overdosed, but luckily, they'd stabilized her in time. Seeing Ruth lying there, pale and fragile, her one sharp feature soft and defeated, hit me harder than I expected. All the bravado, all the corporate scheming, it was gone. She looked more like the little cousin we grew up with than the ruthless businesswoman she'd become. Mark stood beside me, arms crossed, voice low. "She's lucky. If we'd waited another hour." His words hung in the air. When Aunt Linda walked in, she collapsed into a chair, crying. I should have seen the signs, I should have done something. I sat there, holding Ruth's hand while she slept, thinking about everything that had led us here. The sibling rivalry, the jealousy, the lies that all seemed so small now compared to the fragility of life. The next day, after she woke up groggy and scared, we held a family meeting at the hospital room. Ruth's eyes were red, her hand shaking as she admitted everything. I've been taking money, I've been lying, and I can't stop with the pills," she whispered. "I know I've hurt all of you, I know I've ruined trust." Mark's voice softened, but it was firm. "Ruth, you've got to get help. Rehab, therapy, we can't let this happen again, but we can't abandon you either." Ruth nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do it. I don't want to be this person anymore." Uncle Peter, who'd been quiet until now, spoke. "We'll get through this, as a family, but the business comes second to your health. You fix yourself first, then we figure out the rest." It wasn't easy. Ruth went into rehab for 3 months, and Mark stayed by her side, checking the books regularly to prevent any more mishaps. I visited often, helping her navigate the guilt and shame she carried. It was during this time I realized something: the rivalry, the anger, the competition. It wasn't about business anymore. It was about love, fear, and desperation. And in a strange way, seeing Ruth break down, accept help, and start rebuilding herself made me feel closer to her than I had in years. By the time she returned home, the office had been reorganized, safeguards put in place, and trust slowly being rebuilt. Ruth was different now, more humble, aware of her limits, and deeply remorseful. Family business survived, but more importantly, our family started to survive too. And for the first time in a long time, the rivalry that had once driven us apart was replaced by fragile, cautious hope. When Ruth returned from rehab, the office felt strange. Like walking into a space that remembered the chaos but had moved on without you. The employees were polite, some even cautiously friendly, but I could see the tension in their eyes whenever Ruth walked by. She carried herself differently now, slightly hunched, quieter, as if every step was measured. Mark, predictably, was both supportive and suspicious. He'd set up weekly audits, double-checked every invoice, and made sure Ruth had no access to cash or sensitive accounts without supervision. She bristled at first. "You don't trust me," she said one morning, her voice tight. We were in the back office, going over inventory reports. "I do," Mark replied evenly, "but trust isn't the same as oversight. You almost destroyed everything. This isn't punishment, it's protection for you and the business." Ruth's jaw tightened. "I don't need protection, I need a second chance." "And you're getting it," Mark said. "But the second chance comes with rules. You break them, you're out. I don't want to see this business or our family fall apart again." Over the next few weeks, I watched the slow dance between them. Mark was cautious but fair, Ruth was repentant but defensive. Every success felt tentative, every mistake amplified. Yet, gradually, she started proving herself. She handled client calls professionally, stayed on top of inventory, and even suggested some new ideas for streamlining operations. One afternoon, Ruth called me into her office. "Lessa, I know I've hurt everyone. I know I've made this rivalry personal. I don't want to go back to that. I just want to work with Mark, not against him." I smiled, relief washing over me. "That's a good start. You just need to keep proving it, every day." She nodded, determination in her eyes. "I will, I have to." Still, old habits die hard. One day, a minor discrepancy in a supplier invoice set off alarms. Mark immediately flagged it. Ruth panicked, her old reflexes kicking in. I intervened, stepping in between them. "Ruth, stop spiraling," I said. "It's minor, mistakes happen, just explain and fix it." She took a deep breath, counted to 10, and calmly reviewed the numbers. It was a simple clerical error. Mark exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders, and Ruth gave me a grateful, almost shy glance. The dynamic between them didn't suddenly become perfect. The rivalry lingered in small ways, sharp words, competing for recognition, but it was tempered by mutual respect and the shared memory of what could have been lost. By the time Ruth fully reintegrated into the business, the family realized something important: addiction and rivalry had nearly torn us apart, but confronting it had also made us stronger. Mark learned empathy and patience. Ruth learned humility and accountability. I learned that even families as messy as ours can heal if people are willing to face their truths. It wasn't easy and it wasn't neat, but it was real. And after everything, real felt like a blessing. The turning point came during the annual family celebration at Uncle Peter's main office, the event where we traditionally announced yearly profits, promotions, and any major business changes. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone remembered the chaos from the previous year, and you could feel the unspoken question hanging over us: is Ruth really ready to come back? Ruth arrived early, dressed conservatively, with her hair neatly tied back. She avoided Mark at first, sitting across the room, quietly reviewing her notes. Mark, as usual, was already there, going over the presentation slides on his laptop. I could see his jaw tighten every time Ruth glanced his way, but he didn't say anything. When the meeting began, Uncle Peter welcomed everyone warmly. "This year has been challenging," he said, glancing briefly at Ruth and Mark. "But it's also been a year of growth and understanding." Ruth spoke first, presenting a detailed analysis of the new marketing strategy. Her voice was steady, professional, even confident, but it lacked the arrogance she used to care. She made no excuses for the past, no dramatics, just clear plans and actionable steps. Mark followed, adding his insights and giving Ruth credit where it was due. Ruth has been instrumental in these projections. Her ideas have already started showing results. It's a good sign that we can work together, even after everything. For the first time in months, Ruth looked relieved, even a little emotional. She met Mark's gaze and said, quietly but firmly, "I'm sorry, Mark, for everything. I don't want to compete with you anymore. I just want to contribute fairly." Mark nodded. His expression softened, and I swear you could almost hear the tension in the room release like a held breath. "We'll take it one step at a time, but yes, this is a fresh start." The employees, who had been wary of Ruth's return, began nodding and smiling. Some even clapped quietly when Ruth and Mark shook hands. The sibling rivalry, which had dominated our lives for decades, felt like it had finally been acknowledged and contained. Later, as the room cleared, Ruth pulled me aside. Less of "I don't know if I can ever fully make up for what I did, but see, Mark, trust me, even a little, it feels like hope." I hugged her tightly. "That's all anyone can ask for, Ruth. Just keep going. You're proving yourself, every day." That night, Mark and Ruth stayed late in the office, side by side, reviewing the quarterly numbers. I watched from a distance, feeling a strange mix of pride and relief. They weren't perfect, and there were still moments of tension, but the core of the relationship, trust, accountability, and shared responsibility, was finally being rebuilt. By confronting Ruth's addiction head-on, acknowledging the sibling rivalry, and committing to transparency, our family not only saved the business but also started healing the wounds that had festered for years. For the first time, it felt like we weren't just surviving the drama, we were learning from it. And for me, witnessing it all, I realized that sometimes the toughest battles don't happen in courtrooms or boardrooms, they happen in living rooms, hospital rooms, and family meetings, where the stakes are your heart, your trust, and your shared history. Months passed, and slowly, the family business settled into a new rhythm. Ruth stayed clean, attending regular therapy sessions and maintaining her rehab commitments. She wasn't the same Ruth who had once ruled the office with an iron fist, but she was steady, reliable, and most importantly, accountable. Mark continued to oversee the financials with diligence, but there was a subtle shift in their dynamic. They were no longer locked in constant rivalry. Instead, there was cautious cooperation. Ruth started deferring to him in areas she once dominated blindly, and Mark, in turn, acknowledged her strengths without resentment. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. One evening, I stayed late with Ruth in the office. We were sorting through old invoices and planning inventory schedules. The silence between us was comfortable for the first time. "You know," Ruth said quietly, "I don't know if I ever said thank you for not giving up on me, not just you, but Mark too. I ruined so much, but somehow we're still here." I smiled. "You had to hit rock bottom to get here, Ruth, but you did the hard part. You chose to come back." She nodded, her eyes misty. "I want to make this right. I want the business to thrive, but I also want the family to survive it too." And slowly it did. Uncle Peter began delegating more responsibility to both Ruth and Mark, trusting them to collaborate. The employees, initially skeptical, saw the changes and started to relax. Clients who had been uneasy about Ruth's return regained confidence. The business grew steadily, and for the first time, everyone felt like a team rather than divided factions. Family gatherings also shifted. There were no more tense silences when Ruth and Mark were in the same room. They joked, bickered lightly, and occasionally teased each other in ways that felt more like old-school sibling rivalry than outright conflict. It was strange, almost surreal, to see them like this, two adults who had almost torn each other apart, now working side by side. Ruth's recovery wasn't just about staying off pills, it was about rebuilding relationships, earning trust, and learning humility. Mark's patience and steadfastness proved that rivalry could transform into mentorship and support when boundaries and honesty were respected. And I learned the most unexpected lesson of all: sometimes, the people you love most can hurt you the deepest, but they can also teach you the strength of forgiveness. As I closed to the office that night, watching Ruth and Mark discuss quarterly projections and client meetings, I felt a mix of relief and awe. Our family had faced the worst version of itself and survived. Ruth's addiction had nearly destroyed us, but confronting it together gave us a new beginning. The business was intact, the family was intact, and for the first time in years, hope felt real instead of fragile. We weren't perfect, but we were stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. It wasn't the story any of us wanted to live, but it was the story we needed to survive.